Good morning to everyone. I am Guillermo Malpica, Executive Director of American Chamber of Commerce of Mexico, Monterrey Chapter. And I want to give you a warm welcome to all of you to this webinar with the title, Governing Latin America Trade During a Pandemic, Knowns and Unknowns from USMCA Implementation, which is presented to you as a joint event, and we're very proud of that, by AmCham Mexico and Atlantic Council. I want to start by thanking Jason Marczak, Director of Atlantic Council's Adrienne Arst Latin America Center, for his support to this idea of a joint event. And of course, to both teams in AmCham and in Jason's team in DC for the hard work in the preparation of this event. It is no news that we are living very unique times for trade and the world economy and health. Before the pandemic, we had already experienced signals of a new era in world trade with increase of protectionist measures in a number of countries, a trend that has been reinforced by the economic challenges brought by COVID-19. In this context, the USMCA entry into force comes into the scene to give a breath of fresh air to those seeking to maintain certainty on trade rules for the region. It is now time to work on the implementation of the agreement, and that is a task that requires a strong collaboration between all relevant stakeholders, such as the governments of both countries, both national and subnational levels, the private sector and think tanks, among others. Collaboration should be the name of the game, and private-public collaboration is essential to take the most out of this new agreement. AmCham Mexico stands ready to play an active role in the bilateral dialogue for free trade as part of its mission and its raison d'etre. To analyze the effect of the pandemic and the entry into force of the USMCA on regional trade and economic growth, we have to analyze the context, the content of the agreement in a detailed manner, and the rest of trade and economic policies in the region that are needed to act as a catalyst for this negotiated outcome. Let me now introduce the distinguished experts that will start this interesting dialogue about trade. It is a privilege, both professionally speaking and also in the name of the organizations coordinating this event, to introduce our keynote speaker and our moderator of the dialogue with her. Firstly, I am glad to introduce Graciela Marquez, who is Mexico's Secretary of the Economy since 2018. Secretary Marquez is also a renowned scholar and is a member of the Mexican National System of Researchers. Her research focuses on international commerce, entrepreneurial history, and the sociology of taxes, and has published several research papers as well as books on economic history of Mexico and Latin America. Before she was appointed Secretary of the Economy, she was a professor of economic history at El Colegio de Mexico. Secretary Marquez has worked as a visiting professor at the University of Chicago and has taught at both Harvard and Stanford universities. She has also worked as a scholar at Mexico's National University, the Metropolitan Autonomous University, the University of Guanajuato, the University of Baja California, and the Monterrey Institute of Technology and Higher Education. Secretary Marquez, welcome to this dialogue and thank you for your time. Bienvenida. To moderate this dialogue, I am glad to introduce Jason Marczak, who, as I mentioned before, is the Director of the Atlantic Council's Adrienne Arst Latin American Center. Marczak brings nearly 20 years of experience in regional economics, politics, and development. In all of his work, Marczak is laser focused on how to innovate and provide new channels of message and thought delivery to reach new business and policy audiences. In addition to his role at the Atlantic Council, Marczak is also an adjunct professor at the George Washington University's Elliott School of International Affairs. Marczak previously served as Director of Policy at American Society Council of the Americas in New York City, where he was co-founder and senior editor of America's Quarterly magazine. Jason, thank you very much again, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Guillermo. Secretary Marquez, I'd like to start with, turn over to you for your opening presentation before we go into questions with yourself and then questions with the two other panelists. And Secretary, you're on mute.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. It's an honor to participate in this webinar, and I appreciate your invitation. I prepared a presentation that reflects the concepts of on which I think we need to build the new relationship between Mexico and its partners. So let me share my presentation. So I want to use complexity throughout my presentation, and in economic terms, complexity refers to the accumulation of capacities and knowledge needed to produce goods and services. As reflected in this figure, the Mexican economy, which is the green line, it's the more complex economy in Latin America. And it was a complex economy before NAFTA, and it continued to do so after NAFTA. And why is complexity important? Why complexity matters? Mexico is, as I mentioned, the most complex economy in Latin America, and it means that we have developed more economic capacities, and we are in a better position to diversify our current economic structure. Okay, so again, the green line on the top of the figure, it's reflecting the complexity index for all Latin American economies, and Mexico is shown as a more complex economy in the region. And why is complexity matters? It matters because it allows the Mexican economy towards a path of diversification. Next. And that in a more concrete example is how this transformation, how the complexity of the Mexican economy evolves is the number of graduates from science and engineering careers. Year after year, our economy is demanding more engineers and scientists. And we are supplying them in increasing numbers. Actually, as you can see in the right-hand side panel, Mexico is above the average of the world. This phenomenon is a widespread in many sectors of the economy, as the production of goods and services required more capacities and knowledge. Next. And that I really like this graph because it really shows that complexity in the Mexican industrial sector translated into the export platform. In the last 3 decades, Mexico built these strong export platforms thanks to NAFTA. Along with the increase in trade, a significant transformation in the industrial sector took place. And such transformation provides a stronger base for the Mexican contribution to the North American economy today. Mexico is an exporting economy today, but it is also a more complex economy. That means that we are exporting more goods than ever before, but also reveals that we have developed stronger capacities and have included more knowledge in our productive structure. In the trend above, it's the complexity index. And below that is the trajectory of the exports in Mexico. That means that we increase our exports along with the increase in complexity. And therefore, Mexico not longer exports only resource-based products. Mexico developed a export platform based on complex industrial products. Complexity reveals that we can not only continue to produce cars or aerospace exports, but also we can diversify towards branches of the economy that are closely connected to the technology used in these sectors. That means that it offers opportunity for even a larger export basket in the future. So that opportunity, it's a window that might be taken, it's an advantage that might be taken by domestic investors and foreign investors. Next, a good example of how this productive integration has taken place is the aerospace industry along the US and Mexico border. Up to 2017, $30 billion had been invested on both sides of the border. You can see that these are the aerospace industry in states in the US and in Mexico. And as you can see, if you show it by different branches, the aerospace industry, it's a regional productive chain. It's not longer two countries producing and exporting. It's really a regional productive base. We can see almost a mirror image from between the investments in the US side and the investments in the Mexican side. In a few words, this is not just trade, this is economic integration. Next. And now let me refer now to competitiveness of the region as a whole. Competitiveness today should be measured among regions and not just countries. What makes a country competitive is how it connects to other economies. In North America, we are doing just fine. What is shown in the graph is the Global Competitive Index, and it is shown the world best, which is the blue crosses, and then the bars show North America, and the red points is China. So as a region, we're doing fine in the Global Competitive Index, but I think there is a space for Mexico, Canada, and the US to reach higher levels. And particularly, we need to do so within the USMCA region. Next. This is how total exports from the USMCA region looks like. On the blue bar, it is shown that there are the trade of the USMCA region, United States, Canada, and Mexico, and the exports of this region to the rest of the world. So not only we trade between these three countries, but there is a great proportion of exports that go to the world. There is the importance of the intra-regional trade amounts almost 15% of total exports of the USMCA region. Next. The increasing share of North American in global trade reveals that Mexico and Canada increased its contribution in response to the NAFTA incentives. USMCA will continue to be a pulling force for the exporting sectors in both intra-regional and extra-regional trade. Next. The region is also, the region, the North American region is also an important recipient, next, of foreign direct investment. Almost $1 out of $5 in the world of foreign direct investment goes to the USMCA region. Foreign direct investment will flow to North America to have access to a large market. The opportunities for diversification in Mexico, those connected to the complexities of the Mexican economy, will be key for the attraction of foreign investors from inside and outside of the North American region. Next. Now, how do we connect the trade figures, the foreign direct direct investment region, figures and the complexity index in Mexico to COVID-19. One way of doing so is by looking at US imports from China in the first months of this year. This is total US imports from China. And it shows in the graph, we certainly negotiated USMCA before in a pre-COVID-19 world, but we believe that this agreement will be a good foundation to build a post-pandemic global economy. The most important lesson, and as it is shown in the graph, the global disturbances began even before the first, the outbreak of the pandemic reached our continent. It is true that the US have recovered some of the connection with global chains, but the lesson from this graph is that geography will matter again in a world that will at least try to minimize the cost of maintaining value chains that are vulnerable to new outbreaks of the same virus or new viruses in the future, and the political tensions between the US and other economic powers. So total US imports have recovered, but it has shows the vulnerability of suppliers that are outside of the region, of the North American region. Let me go in more detail. These are imports from China of electric machinery and sound equipment, TV equipments, and its parts. And the decline was very important in February, and it slowly recovered. Our point here is that Mexico can easily supply, can build a manufacturing base for supplying these products. So again, geography would be important in planning investments in the future, and having the USMCA entering into force in the coming days would be important in investment decisions south of the US border. Next.
Secretary, is it possible to wrap up the presentation? So
yes, this is the last, and these are the branches. Again, it's not, this phenomenon did not happen only in one sector. It almost included in all sectors of the manufacturing, in manufacturing in the US and in Mexico. So Mexico, it's ready to work with its partners to provide, to supply all these manufacturing products. So I think the post-COVID-19 would look good for Mexico in the sense that it became a more reliable supplier for US manufacturing. With this, I close my presentation and I'm ready for your comments and discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Secretary Marquez. That presentation was excellent insofar as helping to frame this conversation and frame the forthcoming implementation of USMCA next week. And I also just want to take a moment and again thank you, Guillermo Malpica, for the partnership with AmCham, and also acknowledge the two other panelists who are joining us today: Federico Gorbea, President of ADM Mexico, and Francisco de Rosenzweig, the former Undersecretary for Trade in Mexico. Secretary, one quick question for you before bringing in Federico and Francisco. Lots of news this week. One question, we're going to combine both the news items. One is just yesterday, President Lopez Obrador announced his desire to travel to Washington the coming weeks to meet with President Trump to celebrate the USMCA entry into force. And my question there is specifically, what would be the desired outcome of the visit with regard to deepening North America trade relations? And then the other piece of news this week for your reaction are the new IMF numbers that came out yesterday that project now a 10.5% economic contraction in Mexico in 2020, and what additional steps you might be considering for reactivation of the Mexican economy, especially given those new numbers.
First of all, let me say that Mr. President Lopez Obrador is thinking in traveling. This very morning, he announces that there will be a meeting with Mr. Trump, and they are expecting the confirmation of Mr. Trudeau. And the expectation is, first of all, to ratify its commitment to a free trade agreement with Canada and the US, the commitment of securing trade and investment in this region, and to send a signal that it's important that Mexico is a reliable partner for North America, not only in terms of on what we are exporting today, but the possibilities of diversification. Mexico can supply not only automotive products from the automotive industry or the aerospace industry, but we can move to many other branches of the economy given the complexity of the Mexican economy. So the message would be that we are here, that we are willing to enhance our trade relationship, but more important, our productive integration. So that would be, I think, a very important message from President Lopez Obrador on the one hand. On the other, the idea of attracting foreign direct investment for producing what the manufacturing sector in the US is needing, given the disturbances of the pandemic. And on the figures of growth for this year, Mexico is a very open economy, and it suffered greatly from the very start of the pandemic. We register an important slowdown in January and February, even before the first outbreak in Mexico. So it's not out of the closure of the economy, but after this, the first quarter of the year, we had a lockdown of the economy. So these figures reveals that Mexico has been under a lot of economic distress for almost 6 months now. What we expect is that we might have a recovery in the second semester of 2020 that might counterbalance what we have done so far. So it might not be that profound. It might not be a 2-digit fall for this year. We're expecting a much less, around 6 or 8%, rather than a 2-digit fall. That's the expectations the Finance Ministry has in its forecast.
Great, thank you very much, Secretary. I want to bring now in Federico Gorbea, who's the president of ADM Mexico. Federico has helped to transform Mexico's agriculture sector as head of ADM in Mexico. He serves on the board of several companies and associations related to the agricultural sector. And then also Francisco de Rosenzweig, who, as I mentioned previously, served as Mexico's Undersecretary of Foreign Trade and oversaw the TPP Pacific Alliance negotiations and currently at White & Case. And Federico, I have first question for you. And Secretary, thank you for staying with this panel discussion as well. But Federico, ADM is one of the largest investors in Mexico, presence in the country for over 60 years. And how has efficient trade facilitation improved the business climate? And more importantly, looking to next week, how do you see USMCA further improving the bilateral relationship between Mexico and the United States?
Thank you, Jason, and good morning to everyone. I'd first like to take the opportunity to thank the Atlantic Council and the American Chamber of Commerce Mexico for this invitation. It's an honor to me to share the panel with Dr. Marquez, with Mr. Malpica and Mr. Rosenzweig. Jason, you're correct. ADM has had a presence in Mexico for over 60 years, and we are deeply committed to our investments in the country. I think that the business climate and the overall business activity has increased substantially as a result of an efficient trade facilitation. The robust and integrated trade relationship between the three countries that started with the North American Free Trade Agreement and now that is deepening with the USMCA agreement has allowed ADM to better connect with agricultural production and distribution between the three countries. Let me give you an example, taking the US and Mexico to illustrate the size and trade, how deeply integrated these two economies are. More than $1 billion in goods and services are traded on a daily basis that cross the Mexican and the US borders every day. In 2019, the US exported agricultural products to Mexico in the neighborhood of $19 billion, which represented around 48% increase from 2009. Mexico in 2019 exported to the US in excess of $31 billion in food and agricultural products. So having an efficient trade facilitation improves business overall. I am proud that ADM is a key participant in this critical supply chain between the country's agricultural sectors. ADM Mexico operations link the origins with the destinations, as well as connects the Mexican farmers to a broader agriculture market, both domestically and for export. In looking at the new trade agreement, will enhance even further the trilateral trade by improving efficiencies, for example, in the documentation. It also embraces principles that for 20 years have not been considered, like innovation in technology or environmental stewardship. So as this trilateral relationship increases through this trade agreement, we will see a better diversity of products, I would say, at a more affordable price and with less delays. And this is in the benefit of the consumers in the three countries. Thank you, Jason.
Great, thanks, Federico. And for everybody who's watching, if you have questions, feel free to use the Q&A function on the Zoom to submit your questions, and we'll bring those into the discussion. Francisco, a question for you on USMCA as well with regard to the Mexican private sector. And from your perspective, Francisco, having served in government and now serving in the private sector, what do you see are the aspects of the USMCA that are going to be the most important specifically for the Mexican private sector as we look toward reactivation of the economy?
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. I want to thank also the AmCham Mexico and the Atlantic Council for their kind invitation. Madam Secretary Marquez, good morning. I'm honored to be in this webinar with you and the rest of the panelists. I will say that the USMCA allows us to continue to build on what we have achieved over the last few decades, which is very important to bear in mind. So the upcoming USMCA entry into force will send, in my view, a very positive all message in terms of providing certainty, a common understanding on which public policies are needed to strengthen the business environment and to contribute to a predictable legal framework amid the economic circumstances that we are passing by. It's important also to remember that the USMCA is much more than a trade platform. It includes labor, IPR, environmental, and investment provisions, which will contribute to expand the Mexican economy and the well-being of the Mexicans. In my view, the coronavirus juncture gave the Mexican private parties several lessons. One of them is that the NAFTA operation has relied for the last 25 years in the market rule basis. But considering the current circumstances we are living nowadays, the alignment of public policies among the three governments is becoming more and more important in order to avoid any potential disruption in the regional value chain supply. Considering this, a joint effort among governments and private parties is fundamental. It's very important to have the support and guidance for the different governments to take advantage of this powerful trade platform in order to become the most competitive region in the world in the joint production of goods. In terms of issues that the Mexican parties need to pay attention or are paying attention, I will say that one of the very positive issues that the Mexican government has done through the Ministry of Economy are the webinars made by this ministry that is led by Madam Secretary Marquez, and have been pretty good in terms of providing details about the new set of provisions that differentiate the NAFTA from the USMCA, particularly providing guidance to private parties in the issues that they will need to modify and or update in their internal procedures in order to continue complying with the FTA or USMCA provisions. The areas where the Mexican private sector are paying and devoting more attention and efforts are related to the implementation of the labor reform, environmental issues, and of course the rural of origin for their specific processes. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary Marquez, I want to go back to something you alluded to in your presentation from the beginning, which is obviously that the USMCA was negotiated, signed, frankly even ratified in the pre-coronavirus era. Looking at this was rewriting or updating, I guess, the rules for North America, as Francisco mentioned, also including labor provisions, which are very important to this new accord, environmental provisions, IPR. But done at a time when borders were still open and traffic was still free flowing, and now we're implementing the agreement time when North American borders remain partially closed. This pandemic has also, frankly, reminded us of the deep economic interdependence in North America and the importance of, as you were talking about in your presentation, of the supply chains and the economic interdependence and the just-in-time supply chains that we have across North America. So how is the pandemic, coronavirus, reshaping your thinking, the Mexican government's thinking around implementation of USMCA? What additional challenges does that present? And also, how is Mexico looking at working with the US to realign essential businesses moving forward?
Well, we did so when we decided to include the automotive industry as essential industry in Mexico, so that regardless of the state of lockdown, it would remain working beginning from mid-May onwards. So we did understand that it was very important for Mexico to close some activities, non-essential activities, in April and the first part of May, but later on, as the damage to global chain and certain manufacturing sectors, we decided to open up in coordination with the US authorities and the Canadian authorities. We decided that it was important, the automotive and the aerospace industry, and we decided to label them as essential activities. On the other hand, on the medium and long term, I think we have recognized, both countries, we have recognized the importance of supporting the medical sector. So there are already some cooperation in how to revamp the medical supply chain and how to revamp the providing medical assistance within Mexico, so that when we have another outbreak or another medical difficulties, we might not close all essential sectors for the supply chain with the US or Canada. Alignment also goes on the direction of some trade facilitation. We never close the border for trade. We never close our travel, airline cargo. So there are some steps taken by the Mexican government that took well care of trade. So the flow of goods never stopped, even though there was a closure for land crossing along the U.S. border.
Thank you, Secretary. And very important, you mentioned the focus on the essential business, especially the essential medical supply business moving forward. Federico, I want to ask, response to the Secretary's comments, from your perspective, in addition to USMCA, what are some of the policy measures that the Mexican government could take to even further improve the business climate and improve opportunities for Mexican industry as we look ahead?
Thank you, Jason. I believe that communication is fundamentally important, and having an open dialogue between the government and the private sector to be able to express ideas, concerns, and opportunities is vital. Addressing the second part of your question, in the areas of our opportunities, we see a significant impact on Mexico's overall competitiveness in agriculture or other sectors is being centered around having a regulatory change on ethanol, or E10 as it's commonly known. There are three key benefits for the use of E10. First, cost. Ethanol is less expensive oxygen choice. Mexico has historically used NTBE as the preferred oxygen for the gas. The 10-year historical data shows the price spread is about 62 cents per gallon, with ethanol less expensive than NTBE. The second advantage, ethanol has a more environmental advantage, cleaner air. And the third, and a very important one, is that there is an opportunity to bring in the local Mexican sugarcane producers to participate in an important role in the production and the supply of ethanol, while at the same time developing the southern states of Mexico in addition to other states. So a successful sugarcane ethanol industry in Mexico could provide the Mexican sugar producers with key market outlets for their products. In addition, it is estimated that 350,000 new employees could be created, employments could be created, or jobs. As you know, Mexico currently allows E10, or a 10% of ethanol blend in Mexican fuel in areas outside Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey. However, we are convinced that Mexico will stand to benefit in a significant way by opening the country fully to E10 and allowing ethanol blend of 10% also in Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey markets. And the pathway to open these markets is already in place. The government of Mexico only needs to revise the current NOM 16 by ending the ban on E10 in these three states. Ethanol, like I was mentioning, is the cheapest octane source in the world, increasingly being used globally, including in the Middle East, Asia, and South America. It is based on economic benefits. Ethanol, lower price versus MTBE. This is an opportunity for Mexico, the development of the southern states, and for the sugarcane producers. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Federico. And of course, the development of southern states in Mexico is of course a top priority in Mexico itself. Francisco, a question for you, and then Secretary Marquez, I'm going to go back to you with the last question. Then we're going to bring a few of the questions from the Q&A that have come across. But Francisco, importantly, Secretary Marquez in her presentation had a couple slides on China. There's in the coronavirus era, much discussion about nearshoring of supply chains. And so I want to ask you how you see USMCA potentially affecting or shaping China-Mexico ties moving forward.
Yes, well, considering that after the US, China is our second most important trading partner, it's clear that in the slide that Madam Secretary presented today, we are in a very good position to take advantage of the full implementation of the USMCA. And I guess that something that's important to consider is that I guess that we're seeing a shift in the rules of international trade, meaning by that over the last maybe 20 years, we were seeing global value chains. It seems that nowadays it's going to be a more regional value chains. And in this regard, I will say that the USMCA will oblige us and allow us at the same time to bring additional investment in order to have local suppliers, in order to meet the original value content of the production of joint goods between Mexico, well, US, Mexico, and Canada. So at this stage, I will say that, in my view, this will help Mexico to reduce the level of dependence in the imports coming from China, and will divert the input flows in our chain production. So this is something that is going to take some time. You cannot develop local suppliers one day to another, but it will allow to bring investment, to have a much better specialized workforce and better wages. So I think that if you review carefully the slides that we saw a few minutes ago, we're in a great position to bring some of the investment that were done in previous years in China back to Mexico or North America.
Thank you. Secretary Marquez, last question. There was a question on the Q&A about how ready Mexico is in terms of revision of collective bargaining agreements and the rapid response mechanism as we approach USMCA implementation. And there was also a question with regard to rules of origin and how ready Mexico is for the new rules of origin requirements in USMCA. Can you comment on both of those, please?
Yes, since last June last year, a year ago, we have been working on the rules of origin, and we have been being very close to the industry so that they are prepared. First of all, they understand and they prepare for such a change. There is a transition period, an important transition period by which the industry would have time to adapt. And what we have seen with the pandemic is the market in itself, in particularly for the auto industry, will change. So we might see some transitions that might not continue on the same line. It could continue perhaps on electric cars. So that rules of origin might help, the transition might help to design and to be better prepared for a changing market after the pandemic, on the one hand. On the labor issues, we have a close collaboration with the Labor Ministry, and we have been working again with the Chambers of Commerce here in Mexico so that we have a preemptive policy, which is be prepared, understand what you have to do. It's a new law. So we all need, authorities, firms, workers need to understand what are the new rules of the game so that we can comply. We have produced a checklist so that firms, unions, and authorities understand what's going on plant by plant so that we can have preemptive measures before any any demand arises.
Well, with that, thank you very much. I know we could probably continue for another hour, but we don't have the time to do so. I want to thank you, Secretary Marquez, for your leadership
Thank you.
time and early congratulations on the entry into force next week of USMCA. Also, Francisco de Rosenzweig, Federico Gobea, Guillermo Malpica, the AmCham. We've also been joined over the course of this conversation by Mexico's incredible ambassador here in Washington, Ambassador Marta Bárcena. So, Ambassador, great to have you here as part of this discussion. I want to thank Maria Fernanda Perez on my team, and Guillermo, thank your team for putting this incredible discussion together. And we look forward to more opportunities, and thank you to all of those participants who joined today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Jason.